Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia. I'm Juliet. We're talking about the criminalisation of forced marriage in Britain. There are over 8,000 forced marriages every year in Britain alone. I was on a train this morning and an advert for a charity helping women forced into marriage posed a powerful question, which kept me reading. Do you remember your first period? Leaving school, getting married? Irina does. She's 12. Now, joining me in the Voice of Russia's London studios to discuss the criminalisation of forced marriage in the UK is a survivor of forced marriage and author of Belonging, Sameem Ali. Diana Nammi, a director of the Iranian and Kurdish women's rights organisation IKWRO. Anne-Marie Waters from the National Secular Society. Dr Aisha Gill, a reader in criminology at the University of Roehampton and an expert on forced marriage. She's not with us in person but joins the discussion down the line. So my question to all of you, and I will come to you all in turn, is will this new legislation lead to fewer women from the UK being forced to get married against their will? Sameem Ali, I'll come to you first.
The new legislation will drive it underground. Let me just tell you my story briefly. I was taken out of school at the age of 13. I was taken abroad to Pakistan, where most of these forced marriages happen, and India and Bangladesh. And so I was taken abroad. I was forced into a marriage. I was brought back to this country at the age of 14. I was pregnant at the time. No questions were asked. Forced marriage does not happen overnight, and questions need to be raised before the act actually happens. If young people are taken out of school, why aren't the school asking questions? If a young person comes back from abroad and is in this country pregnant, why aren't any questions being asked at that point? Why does it have to? Why are people waiting until the act actually happens to actually tackle this? And also, forced marriage. The elements of forced marriage are already a criminal offence. Kidnap, rape, child abuse, harassment. They're already a criminal offence. And so by packaging up forced marriage and criminalising it in its entirety, is actually sending a clear message to the victim that their voices are not being heard.
Diana Nammi, you're a director of a women's organisation, the Iranian and Kurdish women's rights organisation. You believe that the criminalisation of forced marriage will deter perpetrators?
Definitely. I think criminalisation of forced marriage is sent two strong messages, one for perpetrators and the other for victims or survivors. For the perpetrators, which is the main message for them, telling them that don't do this forced marriage, don't force anyone into a marriage. If you do so, you will commit a crime and you will be persecuted. It can be for family, for parents, for brother, for sister, for uncles, for anyone who force someone into a marriage. The second message is strongly for women themselves, that law is in your side, you will be protected. And this criminalization actually gives lots of confidence, lots of self-esteem to women themselves, that they will be supported. And I have to say that in the UK, still we have the Civil Act for those that they don't wish to go through the Criminal Act. And like many other acts, if someone want to withdraw their complaint, still they can do so.
Before I come to you, Sameem, I'd like to bring Dr Aisha Gill into the conversation.
Good morning.
Good morning. Will the new legislation lead to fewer women from the UK being forced to get married, or will the criminalisation of forced marriages maintain the same level of them taking place in the country?
Well, and you pose a very good question. I think the key point that needs to be made is that any primary purpose of any legislation in respect of forced marriage must be there to protect victims. Now, it's already been echoed by Sameem Ali and her experiences that actually, indeed, many victims are reluctant to report their experiences to authorities for fear of their family will face criminal sanctions, and it has to be unequivocally stated that the creation of a specific criminal offence will actually prevent victims from coming forward to actually obtain essential assistance and will directly impact, more importantly, on their ability to access justice, as they will actually be unlikely to evoke existing civil remedies. My concern is, and the concern of over 136 organisations, including leading barristers, if I may say so, is the higher standard of proof in the criminal courts, which will have a significant effect upon the rate of effective and successful prosecutions in forced marriage cases. The Forced Marriage Unit assisted around 400 actual and potential victims, leading to, note, 293 forced marriage protection orders. Now, that does suggest that forced marriage protection orders are working, are effective, so we do need to give due regard to that. It is also should be stated that actually domestic violence is prosecuted under a range of separate offences. There is no existing or proposed specific criminal offence of domestic violence. So what we need to be giving due regard to in balancing this debate out, and I recognise that it's important to put the victim at the centre of this, is that the Crown prosecution can and should and does prosecute large number of serious criminal offences under existing legislation, and that also applies to forced marriage. As Sameem Ali has clearly stated in relation to statutory legislation ranging from common assault to cruelty to persons under 16, right the way through to harassment, blackmail, false imprisonment, and in the most extreme cases, murder.
I really do want to bring in Anne-Marie Waters from the National Secular Society for her opinion on this and your answer to the question.
I very much agree with Diane on this, that it is we need a strong message on this, and this will bring a very strong message both to perpetrators and to victims. And one of the things as part of my work that I have sat with women in court, and I've watched how their confidence grows and how their demeanour changes when somebody who has hurt them is punished. And it's a very important thing a very important message for a government to give to people, is that we will protect you from this. And just on some of Sameem's counts, or on some of her points, I mean, she said it would drive it underground. It already is underground. And secondly, you may very well be prosecuting the wrong people. We want to prosecute the people who are forcing the marriage rather than the actual sexual act. And a prosecution for rape simply wouldn't prosecute the people who have forced the marriage in the first place.
Can I just say that my forced marriage, my brother was charged with kidnap, and the only organisation that actually got it right were the police. Let me ask you this question. If you're between the ages of 13 and 18 and you're asked to point the finger at your parents, because it is the parents that force people into marriage, if you're asked and to actually put your mummy and daddy in jail, would you do it?
You would have to do the same thing to bring a prosecution for rape or kidnap. Surely, you're still being asked if you want to prosecute your family for other offences, which is what you're arguing that we should do. Surely the same question will be asked of the victim, to point their finger at their own family. This is about a clear message from the government that we will not tolerate this. It's to perpetrators to say we won't tolerate it, and that we're no longer afraid of this issue. You asked yourself, why are questions not asked if a 14-year-old comes back from Pakistan pregnant? Because of fears. Those fears are going, and we won't be afraid to prosecute it. And culture and religion will not be accepted as justification. Very important message.
First of all, I have to say that forcing someone into a marriage simply is the breach of human rights of every individuals, from children to elder people.
I agree with that.
We have good. Sorry, wait for me, please.
Forced marriage is a human rights violation.
Yes, it is. It is. But okay, just wait, Aisha, please. Yes, it is a breach of human rights because everyone should be entitled to choose freely who to want to marry and to live with.
There.
Yes, no, it is argument. You are talking about elements of that. Yeah, there are different issues. But if you look at the forced marriage, forcing someone to be raped. It's shameful that families arrange that for their daughters to be legally, by religion or whatever it is.
It's not legal to rape somebody.
To be raped.
How are you saying that? It's legal to rape somebody. It's not legal.
I wait for you to talk. So please, wait for me to finish. And forced marriage is a package of all of those crimes. So why we need to have an umbrella to cover the other marriage, the other crimes? Forced marriage is a crime, and I am so glad that it has been considered here. I think it's a historical point for achievement of women's rights and human rights and the rights of those people that want to choose freely. So it will help. It will not deter clients or victims. It will actually push back the criminals, those people who are forcing women into a marriage. We have practiced it in other countries, and it was very successful.
We don't know the numbers from other countries at the moment because, it's only recently been criminalised in other countries.
No, it's not. Norway
and the victims
quite a long time.
I don't think there's any disagreement between all the speakers here today in some important debates that the government, that we are, all of us, taking the problem of forced marriage seriously. And we're delighted that the government is. And we are all unequivocally agreed that it actually constitutes an appalling violation on an individual's fundamental human rights. And let me say this, I think it's really important that as activists and academics and those of us who are human rights defenders working in this field, we welcome the government's announcement with regards to criminalising breaches. I think that's really, really important. And we also welcome the introduction of forced marriage as an aggravating feature in sentencing of criminal offences. What we are concerned about is the government has failed to listen to the majority view of informed, experienced experts in the field, NGOs, charities, lawyers. The Prime Minister, when he announced the intention to criminalise the forced marriage, what we have not seen before and what was leaked in a memo from Number 10, which was published in The Guardian last week, was that Number 10's decision is all a part of a strategy to regain the support of women and black and minority women, as not criminalising would have been seen by David Cameron and his government. It would have looked bad. Now, doesn't look like it's a victim-centred decision at all when you hear about those leaked documents from Number 10. And also, we've neglected to have the discussion that where is the infrastructure for supporting victims? That has not been in place, even when the Forced Marriage Civil Protection Act was introduced in 2008.
The reason I mentioned the advert I saw on the train and the powerful questions it posed, it's made a lasting effect on me. And actually, what I really want to know is the victim of forced marriages really at the heart of this government legislation, albeit welcomed by groups who think that the criminalisation of domestic violence and rape and being put on a government agenda and a high media agenda is welcomed. I think we all agree on that. But I think there is an element of the victim being ignored. And I don't think we can ignore the survivor of a forced marriage in the room with us today, Sameem Ali.
You're absolutely right.
And I think, and you stand by the fact that this government legislation is going to push it further underground.
A high percentage of these marriages do not happen in this country. The young people are taken abroad, and my fear is that the countries in which they are taken, they will be married and they will be left there because the parents already know it's wrong to force people into marriage, and the parents are going to know it's a criminal offence in this country, and a lot of these young people are going to be taken abroad and left there. And I have spoken to many, many, many victims, and I have actually been very blunt and asked the question, if it was a criminal offence, if you had to go to court and point the finger at your mummy and your daddy, would you have done it? And most of them have said no. They would not go to court. They would not point the finger. All they want to do is get out of the situation, get into a safe place, and get on with their lives. They do not want to point the finger at their parents.
Joining me in the Voice of Russia's London studio to discuss the criminalisation of forced marriage in the UK is Anne-Marie Waters from the National Secular Society, survivor of forced marriage and author of Belonging, Sameem Ali. Diana Nammi, the director of the Iranian and Kurdish women's rights organisation. Down the line, Dr Aisha Gill, a reader in criminology at the University of Roehampton. Now, Anne-Marie Waters.
We don't legislate, we don't make criminal laws based on whether or not somebody may or may not testify. Lots of people don't testify in rape cases, but we haven't not criminalised rape because of it. We can't have, we have had in this country for decades a paralysis of fear of touching issues like this, and many people have suffered because of it. It is time that the government said that we are not going to tolerate this, and it doesn't matter what culture you come from or what religion you profess, we will not tolerate that. And the only best and only way from our point of view to do that is to criminalise it. We cannot be deterred from criminalising because somebody may or may not want to testify.
Diana Nammi.
Yes, and continue what Anna said. I think both Aisha and Sami, I'm afraid they are sending a wrong message. The message is not for victims to not come forward. This message is for families to not please. You are twisting it. The message is for people.
How am I twisting
it? The message is for those people to not force your children into a marriage. Otherwise, you will commit a crime. It will make communities. It will make communities to think twice. And about social services, and I think this criminalization will bring lots of education to all professionals who are working with victims, with children, with men, with young men, with everyone in the society. It will educate teachers. It will educate health authorities. It will educate professionals to be able there. It will educate children themselves that if they feel that they are at risk of forced marriage, come and seek help. There are different ways of helping them and different way of supporting them. It's important to give the correct message. Please don't.
The young people have already started coming forward. They already have started talking about this within schools. They've already started creating that ripple effect. And this legislation is not going to help that matter of fact. It's going to be pushed under the carpet. Whenever there's going to be a case of forced marriage, the police are going to be called. Preventative mechanisms needed to be put in place before this legislation came into play, and that has not happened.
Forgive me, I've listened to the contributors with due respect, and I think it has to be stated. I think it's quite offensive to state that we, as activists and academic survivors of victims of forced marriage, are responsible for escalating forced marriage. I think that's wholly offensive. I think it needs to be stated unequivocally and again and again and again. To create a new offence does not automatically have a deterrent effect. If a person is charged, the charge has to be proved to the satisfaction of the court, the jury, on sufficient and credible evidence on criminal standard of proof. And it's more likely that these cases will be hotly contested. It will also entail a long and drawn-out process. And also, what we need to recognise is that the perpetrators, there's often not a single individual who's involved. It will often involve the wide extended family in one degree or another. And sometimes it may also include family, friends, and other members of the community. So what we need to be aware of is this. It's difficult enough for trained professionals to distinguish between an arranged marriage and a forced marriage when then it's believed that the jury may also have problems as well. So we have to be responsive in a responsible fashion, and that requires putting in preventative measures which are appropriate and useful. And I state this unequivocally: forced marriage is a crime and can be prosecuted. It can be prosecuted from common assault to harassment, blackmail, false imprisonment, rape, and also with regards to putting support mechanisms for children at risk of being forced into a marriage, are also entitled to a statutory protection afforded by the Children's Act 1989.
It's interesting. The argument is being put forward that criminalising it will be a long, protracted process and there'll be burden of proof and standards of proof will be higher than in civil. But then we're being told simultaneously there are already crimes. You can charge with rape and assault, and they're also long and protracted criminal processes. So I'm not sure why one is okay and not the other. And I agree with Diana. I think why should we have all these sporadic crimes when we can prosecute people under one specific crime, and the right hurt people, the people who forced the marriage in the first place.
I think, though, the point which has been made by Sameem is that the existing laws in place meant that women or boys victim of a forced marriage or rape or domestic violence were able to find and seek help. The criminalisation of this process, and I've spoken to a barrister who said the same, does make the whole process of being a victim to seeing your perpetrator in court, it could take up to 2 years. And at this point, there could be pressure upon the person from the family to not put your parents in the dock. In societies where there's enormous shame brought upon families, I personally could see that that would perhaps influence women or men not to take the perpetrator to court.
I think you raise a really good point. Leading barristers that have up to 40 have signed a letter that was sent to the Right Honourable Prime Minister David Cameron. And one of the key points were highlighted to him was that it actually takes away victim choice. Victims are deterred. We know from evidence that coming forward. We've got you've got a very eloquent Sameem Ali speaking here today, talking about her own personal experiences, and also the concerns with regards to victims are not in control of the proceedings. We know from evidence that there may be reluctance to criminalise of parents. Let me give you an example, a concrete example. In August 2008, Dr Hamera Abedin was a victim of a forced marriage. And she had been subjected to physical violence, psychological abuse, and also under coercion and duress. And she was denied contact with friends and lawyers. Now, although the Forced Marriage Protection Act was not actually enforceable in Bangladesh because she wasn't a British citizen, Dr Abedin was able to work effectively with leading solicitors firms, Dawson Cornwall in the UK, and they worked successfully with the authorities in Dhaka, the Sarah Hussain leading barrister there. And in December 2008, she was able to return to the UK, and her lawyers immediately appeared at the High Court in London to instigate nullity proceedings to void the marriage she had been forced into in Dhaka. Now, this case really highlights, some of the kind of innovative aspects of the Forced Marriage Protection Act, and many, many organisations were delighted with this outcome. And even Dr. Hamera Abedin said herself that she could not possibly criminalise her parents in the manner that was described. But her rights, at the end of the day, were protected, and that marriage was annulled.
I know this experience that Aisha talked about, but we have got different experience. On the daily basis, we are working with women who are victims of forced marriage from Middle Eastern, mainly our organization dealing with Middle Eastern country, but we have women from Eastern European, we have women from Asian communities, which they prefer to come to us. And actually, in a consultation that we have done in response to the government, we invited them to talk about this. Even one single woman were not against criminalization. All of our clients are from Muslim community. Some of them are wearing hijab. All of them were strongly about for criminalization. One of them even said, comparing women with road accident and driving law. And they say even for a car, in the street, they are law. People, if they do something against the road laws, they will be persecuted. But as a woman especially, we will be forced into a marriage. We will be raped. We will be tortured. We will be forced by threatening us, by threatening our families. And no one will be persecuted. Are we less than a road accident or something? We are women, we are human beings. I think it's very strong. The message from those women was not to protect women. It was for protection, it was for safeguarding them, but the message was for their family. My question is that, how many more women and boys would be suffer by a forced marriage, suffer all their life by rape, by torture? Some of them commit suicide because they feel there is no other way to get out of this marriage. How many more people will be die for us to accept that it should be a crime? I think criminalizing forced marriage taking a huge step in really reducing this problem, because the family will not do it. And another issue is the pressure from the community over each family. Then it's a huge effect for every single people to say that I cannot force my daughter into a marriage because it will be against law. And it's for every single people, not for one family. So it's very positive.
I think you've raised some really good points, Diana.
Final word from you, please, then, Dr. Gill.
I just want to state unequivocally that there's some really important points being made in the debate today. But it should be also stated that Ashiana Network, which is a dedicated forced marriage refuge in the country, in the United Kingdom, asked 20 current residents in its 3 refuges what they thought of the proposals. So here we go from a victim perspective and ending on a victim perspective note. 7 said that criminalisation might help raise awareness of the issues within affected communities, that is potentially deterring families from engaging in the practice. However, the majority of those who partook in that research agreed that if forced marriage were a criminal offence, standalone criminal offence, let's be absolutely clear about this, because we all recognise it's a crime. We all do. We don't disagree with that. We're talking about the debates, about the nuanced debate with regards to standalone legislation. And in this regard, the refuge members in this organisation, Ashiana Network, said that if forced marriage were a criminal offence, they would not have gone to the authorities for help, because they would not see their parents being prosecuted in a criminal court in prison. And several worry that criminalisation, specific standalone criminalisation, will lead victims who reported their plight to be ostracised or even disowned, or even in the most extreme cases, murdered. So let's not forget the victim with regards to this debate.
Anne-Marie Waters from the National Secular Society, I'd like a final word from you.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, the standalone crime of forced marriage is incredibly important. I mean, it keeps coming up and keeps being argued that there is rape laws and assault laws, and I've got to reiterate this. Yes, there are, but all of the things that would deter women from taking a prosecution for forced marriage, they still exist to deter her for taking a prosecution for assault or for rape. And, you know, as well, I'm sure many of us can quote women who don't want this, women who have been through it, who don't want it criminalised. We can name just as many who do. You know, Carmen Nirvana carried out a survey, and all of the women that they spoke to who had been through this, all of them want it criminalised. So it's, you know, it's difficult to say, oh, women don't want it, when actually you're hearing different people say different things.
Survivor of a forced marriage and an author of a book called Belonging that I see translated here in Russian also. There's obviously an international market for stories, for help. We've heard from everyone and all their differing opinions, but I will have a final opinion from you, please, Sameem.
This new legislation is not only going to make young people be forced into marriage, it's going to force them to give evidence against their parents. And I think no young person that I've spoken to, and no young person between the ages of 14 and 18 will actually stand up in court and point the finger at the parents. And let's be real in this, you know, it is the mummy and daddy that forces the young person into marriage.
I'd like to thank all my guests for a very interesting and lively and honest debate today on the Voice of Russia in London. Dr Aisha Gill on the telephone, Diana Nammi, Anne-Marie Waters and Sameem Ali for joining me, Juliet on the Voice of Russia in London. Stay tuned for the headlines.